Hi everyone! So today is my day 5 of my vulnerability video diary, and I just wanted to say thank you to anyone and everyone that is following along with my journey. It's greatly appreciated because I have stage fright and I have problems with scattered thoughts. So this is really good practice for me. So I really appreciate anyone that's staying tuned and is getting something from my videos, because that's all I can hope for. So yesterday I told you about the sexual abuse and ways to overcome some of these traumatic events in your childhood. And today I wanted to the title of this one is "The Struggle is Real." So I wanted to also go over just a little bit of yesterday. I kind of left out a lot, and I didn't even realize it until yesterday evening that I didn't really give too much information about who my actual abuser was. So I'll just go over a little bit of what I remembered last night before I went to bed. So, my mother was remarried after spending several years with my father and his abusive OCD sort of behavior. And she remarried to a guy who we thought was just quite amazing. You know, he was just the coolest guy, and we got to know him and we loved him. And during this time, we kept moving from house to house, spending time visiting with my dad and then visiting with my mom. So we kept being, pushed back and forth, and it was a difficult time for us. And we ended up moving to Kansas from Florida, away from my father, who was stationed there in the Florida area. And some of the things that I remembered with my stepfather, some of the good memories, the very beginning before anything had started, was I looked up to him, and him and I, we had this great bond, and we used to hang out together a lot, and we used to enjoy each other's company. And there were several times where late at night we would watch TV together. I'd sit on his lap, and it was like a lazy boy sort of rocking kind of chair. So we would just relax and just enjoy the moment, watch TV together. And, I craved that sort of fatherly figure where I could cuddle. And I wasn't getting that from my father, that's for sure. And I believe this sort of bonding time happened before we left for Kansas. And then I remember he used to blow my mind when he used to put my little fist inside of his mouth, and I thought he was eating my fist. So this is one of the memories that I had. One of the funniest memories is that every time he put his fist in his mouth, my fist into his mouth, I thought he was eating off my arm, and he was making his way down. So, but anyways, there was, I guess it's called like a honeymoon phase, where someone starts to change after a certain time. And he got into the sort of parenting. He was no longer the best friend, the friend. He wasn't winning us over anymore. He was now parenting. So he got into the parenting and everything. And I remember once he had disciplined me, and he had spanked me, and he felt so bad about it, where he sat me down and we discussed it, and he apologized for doing it, but he said that he needed to do it because I had done something wrong. I don't remember what it was, but I just remember this conversation where he got on my level and he explained it, but he felt so bad that he spanked me for that very first time. And I remember when we had moved to Kansas, the boys started to get out of control. And I think maybe because we had moved away from my father, who was very strict, they started to get out of control slowly. A little defiant and curious and rebellious, I guess. But my mom started to work 2 jobs, and my stepdad was working 1 job. And I don't remember if it had happened when he was fired or he quit during a time that he was unemployed, or if it had happened during a time that he was employed but he wasn't working that much. But he was home a lot more than my mother was. She was working so much to provide for the family. There was a few of the encounters happened, and I remembered I started to figure out a way out of them or to avoid it altogether by staying with my friend down the street. And I knew that my mom would be okay with it because we went to the same school. I went to school at the same time, and we lived right down the street, so it wasn't a big deal. And her mother was dependable to help me to get to school and everything. So I had oftentimes stayed the night over there, spent a week over there. We spent so much time together, but it was my way of fixing the situation. So after I had those first few encounters, this is what I had done to get out of it, to avoid it, was to stay with my friend down the street. And I remember a few times he had said that she needed to stay home. So what I always did was I always went to my mother, and I knew exactly what to say, exactly what to do, and I begged to get my way. And I almost always got my way. I always stayed with my friend. And my best friend at the time, or my other best friend, I always found a way. I took advantage of that. Any sort of break in school, I took advantage of it. I was out, I was gone. And when I wasn't able to get out of there, I brought my friends to the house because I thought maybe if my friends were there, nothing would happen. He wouldn't pull me away. And it had worked for a few times, and then there was this one time where I specifically remember having 2 of my best friends there, and he still pulled me away when we all had a sleepover. And I even believe we were all the way up in the attic, which was a very large attic. That's where my brothers slept. That was their bedroom. It was this huge, beautiful kind of top of the house room. It was huge. That could have been the whole house, and it would have been roomy enough. So we had all spent a lot of time up there because we were all close in age. So I believe we had all had this sleepover party, and he had pulled me away this one time, and it didn't work anymore. My whole plan. So my plan I needed to continue was to get out of there because he can now pull me away from my friends. So, well, enough with that, because that was just something that I wanted to talk to you guys about. But the struggle is real. So I wanted to get back to my day 5. The struggle is real. It's the time after telling my mom. From the moment that I had told my mom, she was distraught, she was angry, and she was beyond herself. Literally moments where she lost her mind because she was just overwhelmed with the pain and hurt from her husband doing that to her daughter. And she felt betrayed. So she took it so hard. And it was difficult for years and years. So I have everything typed up so I can kind of remember my area where I want to touch on. So about a week after, we went into hiding so that we couldn't be found by my stepfather. he was searching for us so that he can communicate with me and apologize or whatever. We don't really know exactly. We just know that he was trying to talk to me as a minor, and it was not okay because of what he had done to me. So he kept trying to catch us while we went back to the house to get clothes, or he followed us for a while. He was stalking us, and so we were in hiding in this one bedroom, really small apartment. And it was my brother Danny, who's my older brother, John, who is my twin brother, and Christopher, who is my baby brother, and then me. So I have a younger brother who's just younger than me but older than my baby brother, but he lived with my father because he was named after my father. So my father kept him most of this time. Like he never let him out of his sight to live with my mother. So he endured the mental and the physical abuse the longest with my father. So anyways, about a week after, I told my mother, and we were in hiding still in this one bedroom apartment with all my brothers. My mom had gotten cozy with the guy right away. She did. So they started their relationship off, and he was taking care of her. And my brother, when this happened, my older brother was with a friend, so he didn't know. So he stayed with his friend until we were able to communicate, hey, we're here, so you can come over here when you get a chance. So he ended up coming back. But this particular night, I remember I was sleeping on the couch and all the boys were on the floor, and then in the middle of the night I felt someone touching my behind, my bare behind. I felt the contact, the warmth from the hand, and some like moving, and it felt really weird, but I know exactly what it was. So because I knew what it was, I all of a sudden, just a quick response, I rolled over and I used all the strength that I had, and I punched whoever it was, and punched him in his head and knocked him down. And I got up really fast, and then I went to the restroom to investigate and clean myself up. And the next morning I told my mother about what happened, and because she had told me if anything like this happens again, to always tell her right away, so that she can do something about it. She can make it better, whatever it was. She told me to tell her, and so I did. She decided to get help with it. So I'm not sure, like children's family services or child, whatever it was, she contacted the right people, and she let them know what's going on. Because of everything that's going on, everything is confusing and messed up, and it's overwhelming for everyone, and it's not the right situation. So they asked if there was anything else going on with any other children, anger, anything else, and she said, yes. And another one of my boys is angry and throwing knives at his brothers. So 2 of my brothers were flown out of Kansas and they went to my father's to stay there. So my mother was distraught from this. She was very upset from it because now she had her kids taken away, even after finding out what had happened to me with her husband. So it was even more, it was a heavier weight for her to bear. And now I have to explain that something had happened, like a very traumatic experience had happened to my brothers when they were a few years younger, when my mom was still married to my father. There was a neighbor kid that was about 16, who was mentally retarded, and something had happened to him that he didn't understand, and he was confused about it. And see, I can't go into detail with you guys about it because it's not my story to tell. But all I can say is it was sexual abuse, sexual assault, and to two of my brothers, and this sort of trauma, it really affects someone. So it affects a child and it confuses them. So since this had happened, and since what had happened to me that one night, I have forgiven my brother, and we have let bygones be bygones. I think that's how the saying goes. But I forgave him and I released him of his debt, and I know that was helpful for him because I bet he was just full of regrets with it. And but I know that the confusion and what had happened, trauma seriously messes up children, and we all take it differently. We all do things differently. There's me, it's totally different from my brother and the way that he handled it. So, and I haven't exactly gone over everything, how I took it, but I will in the next few videos. But anyways, so let me get back on to so we were in hiding, and my stepfather, he found out where we were, and he flattened the tires on the car of my mom's new boyfriend. And so we no longer had a car, and now he knew where we were. So I think at this time we ended up going into a safe house, and we stayed there for about maybe a week, and we hid away, and the ladies there, they took care of us. They gave us what we needed. We just picked up and we just left. We needed to make sure that we were safe. And then when we got out, I think I had gone to live with my grandmother, who was living with my great uncle and my great aunt in their house. And so she cared for me there so that we could be safe, so I can be safe. And I remember this one particular day, the phone rang and I picked it up because I'm assertive like that. So I picked up the phone right away, and it was him. And he was telling me, I'm really, really sorry. He said it in his own way. I'm just paraphrasing here. But he said he wanted to talk to me in person, and he wanted to apologize. So he was very apologetic, and he said he was outside to look outside the window. And I did, and my grandmother was asking me, who's on the phone? And I told him, who's on the phone. And she snatched the phone and she started giving him a mouthful. And he was outside, and she hung up the phone. She called the police, and then he ended up leaving. Or I think she had told him she was calling the police, so she warned him, and then called the police, and then he left. So, whatever the timeline is. So, he tried to communicate with me, and I think after that, I went back to living with my mom, and so my mom and her new boyfriend, they drank. They had that in common. My mom was depressed, and they drank. My mom became an alcoholic, so they were an alcoholic couple. They drank all the time, and the money that they got from what is it called, SSI or disability, or from whatever welfare, whatever sort of money that they had, they would use it for alcohol and going to the bar, and even food stamps. They even traded food stamps to get money to be able to get beer. And they used the money towards cigarettes as well because they were chain smokers. So alcohol, cigarettes, so very unhealthy. So, but the alcohol, like, I watched my mom morph over the years, just get worse and worse and worse. And she was a suicidal drunk, and depression and alcohol do not mix. They do not. And she oftentimes had blacked out because she was drinking so much. And her boyfriend was an alcoholic, so he didn't take care of her. So it was my job. So I stood up and I became the mother to my mother and to my brother, my baby brother, who was 4 years younger than me. So he needed a mom, and because his mom wasn't around, his mom was off doing whatever and was negligent, I helped out a lot, and then my grandmother helped out a lot as well. But her life was just a total mess. And I learned to clean up my mom's mess, and I learned to cook and clean, and I learned how to talk to her while drunk, to comfort her, to hold her. And because what was so hard for her was that her husband did this to me. Her husband, she chose this man to marry, and then he hurt me, which in turn broke her heart. And then her boys being taken away because of all the traumas and because of just the chaos. Her boys were taken away. So she had her children taken away. And this was the hardest for her, is that she was a mom and she loves her children. So it was very hard for her to see her children hurting or just taken away. So she took it so personal, and she beat herself up badly. She literally beat herself up. She would punch her face, her head, her legs. She would slam her head into the walls, and she would slit her wrists, and she would drive drunk. And I actually learned how to drive young so that I can drive them. That way they were safe. And then sometimes my grandmother would go and pick them up from the bar just to keep them safe, because you couldn't stop people. You couldn't stop them from drinking. They needed to do it. Get over what, I don't know, but just, you can't stop someone from drinking. So all you can do is just help the situation. In this case, this is what happened. But I remember I had lectured my mom so many times, and I begged her, and I wanted my mom back. I wanted a mom. I wanted something more than what I was already getting. So it was really hard. But I remember there were a few times where she was drunk, and I used that time to talk to her more. And sometimes she would open up a lot more. And because when she was sober, her emotions were, she wasn't able to express herself, and she didn't want to touch on that tough subject. So when she was drunk, I talked to her a lot more, and she was more open and honest, and she was angry and emotional, yes, but when she was really drunk, I told her once that I regretted telling her what had happened to me, about her husband doing that to me. And I told her the reason why is because she's weak. She wasn't mentally able to handle it. And I regretted telling her, and I told her that I wish I hadn't told her, and I could have endured what I was going through And I, would have figured it out. I would have managed it. I would have done whatever I could, because knowing that this was the outcome now, how she was reacting, how she was responding to it, and the hurt that it caused, it broke my heart. So, and I know that, over the years, that's something that I had thought about a lot, but it's true. I wish it hadn't have happened to her, because, something like that, no one deserves that sort of pain. So that betrayal. But we all go through something, and then we all handle it in a certain way. So, but anyways, we lived rough for years. And I remember there were a few times where her boyfriend kicked us out. He kept thinking that she was cheating on him because he was trashed all the time. So he was paranoid. So adding paranoia to alcohol, or with alcohol, is not a good mix. And that's how he was. He was always paranoid. And so he kicked us out a few times. So we ended up in the mission. And we stayed there for a few weeks, and they would fix things, and then we would go back. And he said he would always make that promise to be better and to treat her right and blah blah blah. And so he always made these promises, and he never lived up to it. He just told her what she needed to hear in that moment, and she always went back to him. So anyways, we moved around so much that it was pretty ridiculous. We moved around a lot, and I know it was because of money. We didn't have a lot of money, so we couldn't pay rent, and then we had to go stay with someone and save up the money to be able to afford moving into another place that was a little bit cheaper. And so we moved around a lot, but we had a few family members that could help. Just my great uncle and great aunt and my great grandmother. They lived in the same house, but they always had a room available. So we stayed with them a few times over the years. But my mom's boyfriend, he kept making a bad impression with them, so they stopped letting us live there. So they kept telling my mom that only the kids could live there, and she wouldn't let that happen. So but yeah, so it was hard. We weren't able to go there anymore after a certain point, because my mom burned the bridge, bringing in her boyfriend, who was an alcoholic, paranoid alcoholic, into the house. And I think the reason why is because they used to fight. They used to continue drinking in someone else's house, and then they would fight, and the cops would get called because the door is broken, and the other door, that was slammed is almost off the hinges. And so there was a lot of drama wherever my mom went, because she was an alcoholic, because of the depression, and then her boyfriend. So we didn't have a lot of money, so we lived in poverty. I call it dumpster diving. I learned how to, excuse me, my neck hurts. We dove, and we got the aluminum cans, soda cans, and we got the bottles, and we recycled them, and we got that for money. And we did this, I think it was like every Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then on Saturdays, like we would do it 3 days a week. We would go out and we would hit up the streets, and we didn't have a car, so we had baskets or carts, and we'd have to carry it. And I think we were in and out of having a car. I don't remember, to be honest with you. We were up and down with having a car, because we would sell it because we needed money, and then we would get another one because we had money. So it was just a constant cycle of needing money and getting money. And then so we went dumpster diving, and we recycled what we got. And then we got food. We got food, clothing, and then we also got other essentials like school stuff out of the trash can. So we literally ate out of the trash cans. We used to go to the gas stations and the grocery stores, and they would throw out foods that had expired, but it wasn't actually like expired. It was still good food. So we got used to eating, food for free out of the trash cans. And this is kind of how we survived, because my mom and her boyfriend, the money went towards alcohol and cigarettes. So we lived out of the trash cans. And we got really good at crushing cans, my brother and I. And it was mostly cans, not bottles at that time. Not everyone was doing the plastic bottles yet, but it was mostly the cans and the metal. So my brother and I, my baby brother and I, we used to have fun with it and make it sort of positive, where we explore and find cool things and make the best of that moment. So that's what we had done. And we got used to, when we didn't have a car, we either walked or rode a bicycle or we took the bus. So we got used to the bus system and riding it with, my mom or my grandmother. And then, and I remember these few years, I felt so hopeless as a child. So hopeless with being in this situation and being in poverty, and I took it personal. And at times I had blamed my mom and her boyfriend because they were living off the system and they were barely doing anything. They weren't really taking care of us, and it was difficult. And I had a really good friend at the time that helped, so I was able to go to my friends a lot of the times, and she helped with food and clothes, and so that helped a little bit. And my mom always knew that she could trust that family. And this family, my best friend, something that I'm going to talk about, I believe, tomorrow, about my rebellion. So I don't want to touch on that today. That's going to be tomorrow's topic. So when it came to my mom and her boyfriend, I learned how to defend my mom. And I had used my power as a female and as a child against her boyfriend, because I knew he wouldn't hurt me, he wouldn't touch me, and he never did. He was so close, he was right in my face a few times, we were yelling at each other, and I was telling him to hit me, to do something that I double dog dared him. I had some major balls when I was a kid. I looked straight into my fear and I stood up to it. And I did this because my mom didn't. My mom was submissive, so submissive, and she was weak. And she thought that she needed to be in a relationship. She thought she wasn't allowed to be strong and to have her own voice. She had everything taken away from her. And in almost every single situation, everything was taken away from her. I do have to say that her best relationship was with my stepfather, even though it went sour because of what he had done to me. But that was her best relationship, where she had a voice, especially towards the very beginning of it. From what I know, I'm only judging that as an outsider that has known every person. But anyways, she lost herself in every relationship. She changed herself and she adapted in a way that was too submissive. And she wouldn't fight that much. But when I did see her fight, I could see her strength. Her strength, man, was just powerful. And she was a fighter. And she had told me stories when she was a kid where she used to stand up, and she used to fight a lot because she grew up around boys. And she used to tell me this one saying about the bigger they are, the harder they'll fall. And she said, I've proven this many times. And she used to fight, but she let men tear her down and tear her apart, and mentally and physically. So she became this submissive zombie, and it changed her. So I got to see that strength every so often, but the sort of what I wanted from her, and what I begged and what I had talked to her and lectured her about, was to leave this guy for so long. And I was her mom. I would talk to her, and I would take care of her, and I would remind her to brush her teeth and to eat, and to not let this guy do this to her, and that she was better than that, and she deserved more out of a guy, out of a man, and it was better to be alone than to be with this guy. And like, this is how I was talking to her, I was helping her through it, and she would always say, you're right, and she would gain up that courage. A few times I think once we went to the mission because she knew, but she always went back because she used him as her security blanket. And rather than being out on her own with 2 kids, she stayed with him. And she also needed that, I guess, that love that she seldomly got, but that from a man. So she needed that at night. She needed that closeness with an adult. So it was so hard for her to break away and to heal. And she wasn't healing with this guy whatsoever. They didn't have day jobs. I know her boyfriend, he would work like these, I don't know what they're called, but in the mornings you get up really early, and then you stand outside, kind of like Home Depot over here. You kind of wait for someone to be like, oh wait, I need 4 of you guys to come and help. That's the kind of stuff that he was doing. He would go in and he would get certain jobs like that. And so it wasn't consistent work. And when he did get it, he was able to bring something home. I mean, it wasn't amazing money, it wasn't good money, but it was something. But guess where it went? Alcohol and cigarettes. That was the first place that he would go. And then money, bills. The money would go to bills, and then food. So, actually I think we had food stamps at that time, so, but that was the order. Try to see what else I can do. So, even as children, we know how much we can endure. And I had endured so much, and I watched someone that I loved deeply suffer for so long. And I was tired of seeing it, and I was tired of lecturing my mom and talking to her and convincing her, and then her crawling back to him. You can't make someone make the right choice. You can't guide someone and watch over them and make sure that they do the right thing. You can't, because they're an adult and you can't force anyone. When I had become a certain age, I got this call. We started communicating with my brothers, and this particular time, it was like in May or June or something, I'm not even quite sure, but my dad got on the phone and asked if I wanted to come and visit him, since I hadn't seen him in a very long time. And it was just after freshman year, so it was like at the very end or something like that, but I said yes, talked my mom into it, and she was hesitant because she knew that he would find some way of convincing me that I needed to stay. And she was right. She was right to feel this and to know that this would happen. But I left as if I were leaving for good. And you know, I had written my mom a letter, and I don't exactly remember what I had wrote, but it wasn't very nice. It wasn't very nice, but I can only imagine what I had said. That I was sick and tired of watching my mom make the wrong choices, all the wrong choices, and live and I don't know, maybe wallow in her life. And she was the victim, and I pretty much, I was tired of seeing it. I wanted her just to start growing and to be that mother that I needed. And she wasn't teaching me anything. She was teaching me nothing for years. I was learning everything on my own, but I wanted to be taught. I wanted to learn something that was going to be valuable for my future. And as a 15-year-old, this is crazy to think, I wanted something more. And I knew that if I had stayed with my mom, that I probably would have ended up, not finishing school, getting pregnant, or, just getting worse. So I had this feeling where I wanted to better myself, and I wanted more. And that was selfish of me, but it was the right thing for me. Because I had spent so long caring for my mother as if she were my child, that I actually needed to be a child for once. And I thought this was the best way. So my dad had convinced me to stay. He didn't have to do very much, and I said okay. But then I had my twin brother and my younger brother. So I was so happy. And I think my older brother had just moved out before that, so I didn't get to see very much of him. But so my twin brother and I, John, we started school together, and we started off in Tombstone High School. But yeah, it did get a little bit easier, because my dad, this sort of trauma that happened with my dad was totally different from what was going on with my mom. My dad hadn't abused us that much while we were adults. While we were teenagers, as much as when we were kids. So he had changed a lot, but he still had some major anger issues, OCD, and this did get in the way. So he did lecture and yell a lot, and but yeah, only a few times he had put his hand on me. It was mostly the boys, where they actually fist fought and they wrestled, and not in a good way, guys. It was kind of like head of household, kind of like a power struggle, because my dad was wrong a lot of the times, and my brothers were just defending themselves. So, but yeah, so I think that's it. The struggle is real. You can see that? That's my son's picture of a rattlesnake. It's a privilege to have gone through all the experiences that I've gone through, and because I've gone through it, I know what adversity and hardship and pain, I know what they are, and God's given me a voice to be able to speak it out, and I'd like to be able to just be a voice for others that have had their voice taken away from them, because that's kind of how I felt for a long time. So, and that's one of the things that I pray about so much is to be bold for Christ and to speak it all out, because that was one of my problems growing up. Was I had a hard time talking, and not a lot of my family understand that or know, but I mean, only a handful of people know what I went through as a child, but not the full story, not the full extent of it all. But it was difficult, and it created a lot of insecurities and a very scared, fragile girl. And over the years I had showed in different ways, and but yeah, I've come a long way. Because of Christ. So I think that's today's vulnerability diary entry. So bam, all done, guys. Love you. Stay tuned for the next one. Bye.